Florida football unranked, according to the coaches to start the season. Of course, you know what? The good thing is that doesn't matter. So they play good football, especially with that schedule in that conference against that non-conference opponent. That will fix itself. We got David Waters on the line, of course, from Gators Breakdown. Get on over there to Gators Breakdown on your favorite audio platform or right here on YouTube. David, how's it going?
Going good, Mark. Spring practice. Wow. Fall practice, getting started for the Gators. So, of course, Billy Napier, his first fall camp, getting these Gators ready for that big first game versus Utah.
We'll hit up the coaches poll since I did mention it coming out of the gate. So I kept going through the point totals after the top 25 and found some Florida football at 37. Like that matters, 17 points, but pretty reflective of, there are 17 coaches out there that said, hey, this is a top 25 football team, but most of them want to see a little bit more. And I think that's pretty much where most of college football is on Florida.
Yeah, I think so, Mark. Of course, last time we saw Florida, they were getting beat by UCF in a bowl game. So, I think that sticks in a lot of people's minds there. And it wasn't Anthony Richardson being quarterback in that game. Of course, he's injured, getting surgery. So didn't play in that game either. But, of course, he comes back. He gets a lot of love there as far as one player for Florida. But when you look at the big picture, you can still see coaches have a little bit of question about where the direction of Florida. So, yeah, Mark, as you said, they can quickly turn it around. You look at the rankings, and number 8, Utah comes into the swamp week 1. Number 21, Kentucky comes into the swamp week 2. So there's 2 opponents right there. If Florida is going to shoot up the rankings, they can do it the first couple of weeks, and we'll probably have the best resume out of anybody after the first couple of weeks of the season when you start looking at those 2 teams there. But yeah, if you probably look at Florida, they would, if you want to keep going in the rankings, will probably be in that 30, 31, 32 range, I think, if you would look at it right there. So not too far out of the top 25. But Mark, I think when you look at it, you start comparing them to teams that are ranked, and why are certain teams, why would Ole Miss be ranked in front of Florida? Why would Arkansas be in front of Florida? Miami, other teams like that. Miami, of course, they do have the benefit of the ACC, but they're in a very similar situation, a brand new head coach of Florida. And you want to go back and start comparing stuff to last year when, Florida beat FSU, Miami lost to FSU, all that kind of stuff. So there are certain ways you can look at it and break it down that if you wanted to rank Florida, you could have an argument to do so when you start comparing them to other teams out there. But in the grand scheme of things, I think we kind of knew this was probably coming. You start looking at all the preseason magazines that started hitting around the summertime, and Florida wasn't ranked in their top 25. You started seeing Florida in that 30th range. You go to SEC Media Days, Florida's picked 4th in the SEC East behind. Hey, look, Tennessee wasn't even ranked in the coaches poll either. So a team that a lot of people are hyping a bit, that team's not found. Mark, I think I counted that there were 6 SEC teams, no Florida, no LSU, and no Tennessee. So I think that it lets us know that recent history, and maybe even dating back to the 90s in Tennessee and their historic run in the 90s, and then a lot of hype behind them. I think, those traditional powers there in the SEC, I thought maybe one of those teams would have been ranked, but I think Ole Miss probably being ranked probably shunned one of those teams from entering the top 25.
It also goes back to the individual voters' approach to top 25s. There are certain people / coaches in this instance that makes it kind of like a prediction. Like, I think this is going to be where we're going to land at the end of the season. And other people look at it as, forget the schedule. I'm just going to rank the 25 best teams in the country as I believe these are the 25 best teams in the country. I think that would give a little bit more slant to the SEC. If you're asking me, I think the SEC, I would stretch it out to more like 7 or 8 of the top 25 teams in the country. But of course, they play each other. It's going to knock and suppress a lot of those rankings down based on the quality of the competition. David Waters on the line, Gators Breakdown. Yes, sir.
Yeah, if it was me there, if it's a preseason ranking, I would use it as a preseason ranking. Your schedule shouldn't come up, you shouldn't be penalized for a schedule that you may end up going undefeated. So, yeah.
I completely agree with. I don't approach it as a prediction. I approach it as I believe these are the 25 best teams in the country in order. I don't care who they play.
Yeah, this isn't preseason. Preseason magazines, I can understand. They are making predictions, but in a poll that we have to go by up until the college football playoff rankings come out, it should be this is where we think the teams are heading into the season.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I know that you're going to find out a little bit more later, but very productive receiver, Arizona State's Ricky Pearsall coming in, and of course expected to make an impact, but he's hobbled with a foot issue right now.
Yeah, Mark. So I know I don't know when you put this out, but for everybody out there, we're recording this on a Wednesday. We got the news on a late Tuesday, the day before, that Pearsall is out indefinitely with a foot injury, and that goes back to last week as well. The very last play of the open portion practice we got to see, he comes up limping a bit. Nothing came from that. He was still out there practicing, but that was the last play, so we didn't really know the extent of it till we got to hear more and actually see him back at the next practice. That, okay, well, that him coming up limping didn't really mean anything, but that does stay in your mind a bit now that we get the news a week later that he does have a foot injury. He'll be out indefinitely. The initial feedback I got, Mark, and I don't know how old this will be when people get to listen, because this could break at any time. It's either worse or better than expected. But the last I heard, that it's not, he'll have an X-ray today. It's not thought to be serious, but of course the X-ray will tell more. So that's kind of where it stands as you and I are recording right now. But early returns on Pearsall have been great there for him at the receiver position. Shows the shiftiness that Florida may not have at the receiver position. Shows the speed Florida may not have at the receiver position. He was going to be a big contributor, big playmaker, I think, for this receiver group at Florida that desperately needs a type of receiver that can do those type of things. Florida has the big body receivers. They have the possession receivers. They do have some guys that can get down the field, but I'm still wondering if Florida has a guy that can take a screen past 60 yards, a guy that can make somebody miss, wiggle, and go off for a 40-yard touchdown. And that's what Pearsall looks like he could bring to the table.
Talking Gators with David Waters from Gators Breakdown, one of the fastest growing and certainly one of the very best in Gators football coverage. Check it out on your favorite audio platform or right here on YouTube. Kirby Smart should be happy. He's been making an issue out of this for years now. Florida, Georgia fans all have their preference on whether the game should be played in Jacksonville. And I got to think, you correct me if I'm wrong, David, you've given your opinion here, but you've also provided what you gather in feedback, and you hear as much as anyone from Gator fans on where they stand on this. And I think most college football fans, especially within that rivalry, love the game being played in Jacksonville. But Kirby Smart's had issues with it because it takes away a recruiting weekend from the home team. But now recruits will be allowed from both sides to visit the game in Jacksonville.
Yeah, that was the best short-term outcome I think that could happen for both schools to appease both schools, to appease Kirby Smart. And look, it kind of falls on deaf ears. Is moving Florida, Georgia to home and home, is that going to have an impact on Georgia recruiting? But they're already recruiting at a big level. Is it really going to have that big of an impact? And I get what he's saying. Alabama and LSU play. They love to host recruits for those games. Auburn and Alabama play each other. They love to host recruits for those games. But it's not going to make that big of a difference for Florida or Georgia if they have that game as a home game, and that's going to sway a recruit to go to that school. You cannot sell me on that. I don't care how much you beat that horse. You cannot sell me on it, especially when Georgia's recruiting the number 1, 2, 3 classes year after year after year. It's going to fall. It's going to fall on deaf ears to me. But I have always thought they should be able to host recruits for that game, give them the atmosphere. Now we probably should put out there, Mark, they won't have contact with the recruits. It's just, we'll leave you tickets at the will call. You do get tickets for you and your family. You can come enjoy the game, but it's not like an official visit or anything where you can have contact with the recruits. So that would still be a little different in some ways, but at least recruits will get to see the atmosphere of the 50-50 split and half orange and blue and half red and black, and get the atmosphere of the Florida-Georgia game there in Jacksonville. Mark, it's kind of been a running joke this morning on the Gators Breakdown Plus Discord of what happens to recruits who are interested in Florida and Georgia. Where do they sit? Do they have a certain section of the stadium they have to sit? So there's going to be bleed over. There's going to be recruits. And from what I can understand from the article that came out, both schools, it doesn't matter who's designated home team, both schools will get to host recruits each year for this game. So if you're fighting for a defensive lineman from Jacksonville, you're fighting from a defensive lineman that wants to go to both schools or interested in going to both schools, How does that work out? How does that break out? Do they go sit one section first half of the game and another section the second half of the game? I don't know. It's another storyline to go along with Florida, Georgia.
If you have two great teams playing and they're two great programs, it's going to get national attention regardless. But one of the great qualities of this rivalry, obviously, even in a down year for one or both teams, is that it's one of the very few that's played at a neutral site, and that's got that cachet to it that if you ask any college football fan and you mention Georgia, Florida, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Oh, they play in Jacksonville. They don't play at home. I just think the unique quality of that, you don't want to mess with that. You have one of the few games in college football every year that people identify with because of where you play it. As again, this is probably an outdated term, but the world's oldest outdoor cocktail party. And that's what people remember about the game. And that gives it a distinction and a unique quality that almost no other game, Oklahoma, Texas is the first one that comes to mind, has. And why do you want to mess with that?
Yeah, and excuse me on that one. I don't ever remember hearing Texas and Oklahoma complain about the game being played in Dallas. I mean, for all I know, they both enjoy it.
You would think Oklahoma would really complain about it.
Right. So, and from my knowledge now, don't get me wrong, I'm on the east side. I don't hear Big 12 talk, soon to be SEC talk, but from my vantage point, I have yet to hear either school complaining about that game being a neutral site game.
Talking Florida football, Gators breakdown. David Waters, got to get there on your favorite audio platform or right here on YouTube. David, in regards to everyone wants to hear about the young guys that are flashing. Who have we heard about early in camp?
Yeah, big one so far. Devin Moore, recruited he was a safety in high school, but cornerback coming into Florida. It was a Florida Notre Dame battle at the end of Billy Napier's first recruiting cycle. Florida gets that win, and Devin Moore has come in and really impressed, really fighting for that number 2 cornerback spot opposite Jason Marshall, who come in as a true freshman last year and got a lot of playing time. And that was because Jaden Hill went down with an injury a year ago in fall camp, and Jaden Hill is now dealing with another injury this fall camp, and that's opened the door again for somebody to come along and get that second cornerback spot. And we saw it all through spring, a battle going on there between Hill and Avery Helm, and Devin Moore and Jalen Kimber, the transfer from Georgia. And that battle is going to continue into this fall. And early on, it does look like it's kind of Avery Helm and Devin Moore flip-flopping, taking number 1 reps at that number 2 cornerback spot. So he's come along, one of the fastest players on the team, I've heard, in their new way of clocking speed there, in more than just a 40-yard dash time. They put the vest on and they track their miles per hour, and Devin Moore is up there as one of the fastest players on the team right now. And making an impact, coming along and really fighting for a starting role. And he may not win that number 2 cornerback spot, Mark, but he's going to be in the mix right there to get a lot of playing time at that spot. And if we keep going, Shamar James, true freshman linebacker, he did not take part in spring, but he's on the field now in fall camp showing some nice things. Probably when you go and look at it, besides Ventral Miller, who comes back for his 6th year of college football, one of the few true linebackers Florida has as a recruited linebacker in high school and will play linebacker in college. Florida's got a lot of tweeners, like guys who have played maybe defensive end / outside linebacker that they've tried to fit in at linebacker over the last 2 years, and maybe even doing so a bit this year with somebody like Derek Wingo, who I expect to be a really good linebacker, but he wasn't recruited, or he was not a linebacker in high school. Florida's missed that true linebacker, and I think Shamar James, with that experience in high school, has really hit the ground running as a young guy, a young linebacker for Florida this fall camp. And one more, Richard Garage has been banged up along the offensive line to start fall camp. That's opened the door for a young offensive lineman, not a true freshman, but Austin Barber there for the Gators. Comes in, helps fill in. They've moved Michael Tarquin from right tackle to left tackle to fill in until Garage gets back, which should be very, very soon. But that's opened the door for a young offensive lineman to get some reps and create some more depth there for Florida as well. So you start looking at it that way, Mark. Devin Moore has been the big head turner so far as young guys coming in and making a name for themselves. And one more before I forget, Arliss Boardingham, not a highly recruited guy, but at tight end, a mismatch size and speed there at the tight end position as a true freshman has really come in the first week of fall camp and turned some heads as well at the tight end position, a position that Billy Napier loves to use. Used two tight ends a whole lot back in his time at Louisiana. So we'll see. You know, Florida's pretty deep at tight end. They have a lot of numbers there. So if you do see Arlis Boardingham on the field, you know that he jumped up the depth chart. He passed a whole lot of players, and that means he impressed big time in fall camp to go out there and get on the field as a mismatch nightmare for the tight end position.
David, you mentioned Ventral Miller, a player who led the team in tackles in 2020, out early in the 21 season, obviously hurt the defense tremendously. The linebacking core intrigues me that, of course, Miller comes back, so that's almost an addition because of what happened in 21. Brenton Cox is one of the very best in college football, but you lose a lot of production there, one of which you will see in a Utah uniform coming back. He hit almost 200 tackles as a Gator, Mohamed Diabate. So the linebacking core, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, it should be Ventral Miller and probably Amari Burney to start. And I know Gator fans will roll their eyes. You know, Amari Burney's been there forever as well. I mean, this is, so I said, Ventral Miller's 6th year. This is Amari Burney's 5th year. But Mark, as I said, look, I probably should preface this. Everybody, for me, on the defensive side of the ball gets a pass after the buffoonery of the last staff of not developing and just not adjusting, adapting whatsoever. So your Amari Burney's, your Ventral Millers, your Trey Deans, guys who have been on this defense and not necessarily shown, you know, a lot of positive. I think it's a clean slate for me. With this new staff, this new way of doing things, I think everybody gets a fresh start. But Ventral Miller, I probably shouldn't throw him in that group. As you said, Mark, led the team in tackles a couple years ago. True linebacker there for the Gators. Missed his leadership last year big time. You could really tell on that defensive side of the ball. But he's a tackling machine, and I think Florida's going to need him versus Utah. Florida's going to need him versus Kentucky in those first couple of games. Florida got ran up and down the field on last year versus LSU and South Carolina and Georgia, that middle stretch of the season. And Ventral Miller was a big part of that. Him missing was a big part of that. And Mohamed Diabate, yeah, now he's at Utah. Florida will play him game one, and Florida should run a dive play or a counter play right at him until he proves he can stop it, because he couldn't stop it last year. But he did. He missed spring for Utah there, so that'd be an interesting storyline. And Tyron Hopper also transferred out to Missouri. So Florida will face two former linebackers at some point this year, Mark. But I did say, you know, it starts with Ventral Miller, starts with Amari Burney, but I do think somebody like a Derek Wingo, as I mentioned, recruited a couple years ago as a defensive end, comes in. They move him to linebacker. That was kind of the plan the whole time. He was going to start playing linebacker for the Gators. But there's things he had to get used to. We had an interview with him a couple weeks ago on Gators Breakdown, and look, I didn't backpedal in high school. I didn't know how to backpedal. I didn't know how to play linebacker. So it was an adjustment for him. Now going into his 3rd year with a lot more experience playing linebacker, I expect some big things from Derek Wingo. DeJuan Black, you go back to the spring, was a big-time playmaker at the linebacker position for the Gators, but also one of those hybrid types. You go back in high school, and he had to go to junior college as well. Played linebacker, played safety, played a little bit of a nickel as well. So when I sit here and say Florida's looking for true linebackers, they really are. They have a lot of guys who are versatile, guys who can play other positions, but Florida has missed that true linebacker when they go and recruit. So that has turned a little bit. Scooby Williams a couple classes ago. I mentioned Shamar James as well from last cycle. So it's going to start with Ventral Miller and Amari Burney, but I do expect a lot of other names that I just mentioned to have a big role in this Gator defense.
David, we mentioned Diabate, obviously moving to Utah. There's the connection for week one. College football fans are focused on Ohio State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Oregon, but I don't know if this is not going to be the best matchup of week one. I am so intrigued to see this game. And you mentioned Florida's inability to stop the run over the last stretch of the season. It was like 5.5 yards per carry. And you know Utah is going to be physical, and they're going to run, and they got a back with over 1,000 yards and Tavion Thomas and 21 touchdowns. Have you given this, you starting to get a feel for this matchup? Because we could see like last second field goal type game here, because that's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, this is going to be one of those physical matchups Florida has to be ready for. And we've questioned, Florida's depth up front, and they're going to get tested right away. You got the name of Gervon Dexter up there up front for the Gators, but who else do you point to as a proven playmaker up there up front for Florida on the defensive line? And there's not one. And there's not to say there won't be one, but going into the game, Florida's going to have to prove they have another player besides Gervon Dexter up front that can help stop the likes of a Utah and Kentucky those first couple games. But yeah, Mark, dialing in right there to Utah. And a lot of people will go back to the Rose Bowl. The last time they saw them given, fighting tooth and nail with Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, and then bringing back, some important pieces. Now they lost Devin Lloyd on the other side of the ball there at linebacker as well. And as we said, brought in Mahmoud Diabate. So they're missing some pieces. They're missing, I believe, their leading tackler, which is Lloyd. He might have been their leading sack guy as well, if I remember going back and looking at that too. So
yeah, sacks, TFLs. Yep.
Yeah. And actually, I think he was the leader in interceptions with 4. I don't think he was the leading sack guy now that I look about it. But yeah, either way, I mean, he's a proven playmaker there on that defensive side of the ball. And Billy Napier, even with Anthony Richardson, he's still going to want to run the ball as well. And I do think it'll be our first unveiling of Billy Napier's offense with Anthony Richardson. I do think he opens it up a bit more than what we saw back in his days at Louisiana, but it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out game on both sides. I think Florida and Billy Napier want to be physical, and we know Utah wants to be a physical brand of football as well that we've seen the last couple of years. So, Mark, yeah, very intriguing matchup. If it makes sense, this could be one of those slobber knocker, high profile, knock you on your butt type of games, but still a lot of points. And this just because these teams can be physical and want to run the ball, I still can see both teams getting into the high 20s, 30s. But because of that, and just and wherever you get to the fourth quarter, who is in the best shape comes out to win this game. And Florida may have an advantage there, of course, that game being in Gainesville and the hot weather. It's just a night game, but it's still going to be a hot, muggy, humid night there in Gainesville. So, Florida's playing, probably going to try and keep the game. Mark, I do think Florida needs to, if they can, jump on it early. You'll have the home crowd. You'll have that weather. If you can jump on Utah, put the pressure on them early on, and Florida, to me, has an advantage a bit. We don't know what this offense will look like. And I know we had a spring game, and I know there's Billy Napier tape all the way from Louisiana, but as I said, I think this offense can open up a bit more with Anthony Richardson's potential, as long as he's ready to go and lives up to that potential. I think, Florida comes out throwing the kitchen sink early on at Utah. So if you can get up a couple quick scores early, use that crowd to your advantage, use that weather to your advantage. And if you can get them out of their game plan that they want to do and run the ball and, hit big plays there in the passing game, maybe you can get them out of that by jumping on them early.
You make a good point about the unpredictability of the offense. I was thinking of it from the other standpoint that Billy Napier obviously is the challenge of, we got to play a really good team, and it's our first game, new terminology, new coordinators, new staff for a new set of players. And working that through for the first time with live bullets firing versus Kyle Whittingham, 18 years, everybody knows the deal. Everybody's on the same page. This is our system. This is what we do all the time, and we're ready to roll. I find it intriguing. And then Anthony Richardson, obviously, I could see him balling out, being just a nightmare for Utah's defense, making big plays with his big arm and on the ground. But then I see the Anthony Richardson that, will turn it over a little bit, be a little scatter shot, under 60% completion percentage last year. Which one is he going to be?
Right. I mean, there's a whole lot of questions of what this Florida offense will look like. We can go back and look at the spring game. I think it was pretty vanilla as far as both sides of the ball go. And I think Florida does have the element of surprise a little bit. If they can hit the ground running in fall camp, get everything gel pretty fast, I think they can catch Utah off guard a little bit with what they plan to throw out there on the offensive side of the ball.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Get on over there right here on YouTube or your favorite audio platform. David, we always appreciate you stopping by, man.
Thanks, Mark.